What happens when a Hollywood legend walks into a TV studio expecting a lighthearted chat, only to end up in one of the most uncomfortable live interviews ever aired? From the very first minute, something felt off. The studio crowd cheered like usual, but the smiles on set looked a little too tight, the laughter a beat too forced. No one realized they were about to witness daytime TV history. A clash so tense you could practically feel it humming through the cameras. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments whose side you're on once you've heard it all, because, trust me, by the end you'll have strong opinions. John Travolta stepped onto the View set with his trademark grin, waving as the audience roared. He'd been here before, polished, gracious, pure old-school charm. The panel waited, Whoopi Goldberg steady at center, Sonny Hostin and Sarah Haynes ready with notes, Alyssa Farrah Griffin calm as ever, and Joy Behar, with that glint in her eyes that hinted trouble. Travolta eased into his chair, smoothed his jacket, and nodded to Whoopi as the applause died. She opened with warmth, asking about his latest film, a story about redemption and second chances already stirring Oscar chatter. Travolta lit up. He talked about connecting with the role, the emotional depth, the challenge of finding hope in a broken character. The hosts leaned in, genuinely engaged. For a few minutes it was textbook promotion. Smiles, laughter, smooth rhythm. Then the shift. Joy Behar leaned forward, voice casual but eyes sharp. She brought up a remark Travolta had made a few weeks earlier, something about Hollywood losing touch with real audiences. It hadn't caused much fuss back then, but the way Joy framed it now? It sounded loaded. Travolta's smile faltered just slightly. He nodded, ready to clarify. He said he simply missed movies that connected on a human level, stories that moved people rather than dazzled them. He spoke with care. Joy interrupted. Her tone climbed half an octave, the room's energy changed. She suggested that his comments weren't just about storytelling, that maybe he didn't like how Hollywood was embracing more diverse voices. The crowd hushed. Travolta blinked, momentarily stunned, then tried to interject. Calm, measured, but Joy wasn't done. The other hosts glanced at each other. Even Whoopi shifted uneasily. Joy pressed harder, citing his recent roles, questioning why he wasn't part of the new wave. Travolta's jaw tightened. His voice dropped lower, cooler. He said his remarks had nothing to do with race, gender, or inclusion, that he'd long supported diverse stories. Joy laughed softly, the kind of laugh that cuts more than it comforts. "Name examples," she said. The tension in that room could have cracked glass. Travolta straightened, posture crisp, voice steady. He listed projects, collaborations, moments where he'd pushed for new talent. Joy shook her head, dismissing each example like swatting away flies. That's when Travolta's charm gave way to steel. He told her, firmly, that she was twisting his words, building an argument that didn't exist. His voice stayed even, but the edge was unmistakable. "If you'd read the whole interview," he said, "instead of one line out of context, we wouldn't be here." The air snapped. Joy's eyes widened, and just like that, the friendly chat everyone expected turned into a slow-burn showdown. The crowd was still buzzing from Travolta's last line. You could feel the unease settle over the room. Half of it quiet shock, the other half a sort of morbid curiosity, waiting to see what would happen next. Whoopi leaned in, her tone calm but cautious, trying to steer the conversation back toward neutral ground. "Let's not lose sight of the movie," she said with that steady host smile, but everyone could tell control was slipping. Joy wasn't finished. Her grin was polite, but the air around her felt electric. "John," she said, "when people hear comments like yours, they think you're not happy with the changes happening in Hollywood." Travolta met her gaze squarely. "I never said that," he replied. "I said stories matter. People matter. That's always been the point. It might have ended there, but it didn't." Joy leaned back, folding her arms, that small, knowing smile still on her face. "Sure," she said, "but some people might hear it as nostalgia for the good old days. You know, when stories mostly looked a certain way." The crowd stirred. Travolta took a long breath. "That's not what I meant," he said evenly. I've supported all kinds of storytellers. I've worked with directors and casts from every background. You're twisting this into something it's not. Joy laughed again, light but sharp. If that's true, then name them, she said. The studio went silent. Travolta's jaw tightened. He listed several projects, films where he'd worked alongside newcomers, supported diverse crews, pushed for voices outside the mainstream. But Joy waved a hand dismissively. That was a long time ago, she said. Hollywood's different now. That's when Travolta's posture changed. The easy charm vanished. He leaned forward, voice firm but not loud. You're not asking me questions, he said. You're accusing me of something that isn't there. Her smile dropped a fraction. I'm just asking what people want to know, she replied. No, Travolta said, eyes narrowing slightly. You're creating an argument that doesn't exist. Whoopi spoke up again, her voice more forceful this time. Hey, let's keep it cool, okay? We can have this talk without turning it into a fight. But neither was ready to step back. Joy crossed her arms again. John, you've been around long enough to know words have power, she said. Maybe it's time to take responsibility for how they land. Travolta straightened, his tone calm but cutting. And maybe it's time for people to stop reading motives that aren't there. The studio froze. The applause light flickered, unsure whether to cue the audience or not. No one clapped. Whoopi sighed quietly, eyes flicking toward the producers off camera. Everyone in that room knew. They just crossed from interview to confrontation, and there was no going back. The silence after that exchange hung like static in the air. You could almost hear hearts beating in the audience rows. The crew didn't dare move. Cameras rolled. Every second stretched. Joy leaned in again, her tone light but eyes cold. No one's twisting anything, John, she said. People are just listening. Travolta let out a small laugh, one that wasn't amused. Listening? Or waiting for me to say something you can turn into a headline? Whoopi stepped in quickly, trying to reset the tone. All right, she said, palms raised. Let's bring this back to the movie before we lose the plot here. But Joy wasn't backing down. This is the plot, she said. This is what people care about, whether Hollywood legends like you are really ready for change. The crowd gasped softly. Travolta looked at her like he was trying to decide if she was serious. Then, calm but tense, he said, I've been ready for change. I've lived through it. I've helped make it happen, Joy smirked. Then name the last time you championed a story that didn't center someone like you. That line hit like a slap. Travolta blinked once, twice. He started to speak, but Joy kept talking, her voice rising. You keep talking about authenticity and emotional connection. Maybe what you're really missing is being the center of the story. That was it. Travolta's face hardened. His tone dropped low, controlled, but every word cut like glass. You're accusing me of something ugly, and you know it. You're not asking. You're implying, Joy shrugged, playing it casual. I'm holding you accountable. He leaned forward. No, you're performing accountability, he said. There's a difference. The crowd murmured, low, uneasy, half in disbelief. Whoopi tried again to reel things in, her voice sharp this time. Joy, John, enough. We can talk about this, but not like this. Joy didn't even look her way. I'm just saying what viewers are thinking. Travolta shook his head slowly, frustration finally breaking through. No, you're saying what you want them to think. The studio was ice cold now. Sonny and Sarah exchanged glances, unsure whether to jump in or stay quiet. Joy's voice lowered, cutting through the tension. If you didn't mean it that way, John, why are you so defensive? He gave her a look that said everything. Tired, angry, betrayed. Because I've spent 50 years building a career on respect, he said. And you just tossed that aside like a headline grab. Her eyebrows lifted. 50 years doesn't make you untouchable. Travolta's response was almost a whisper. No, but it should count for something. That line hit different. You could feel the shift, half the audience leaning toward him, the other half toward her. Whoopi took a breath, ready to cut to break. But before she could, Joy spoke again, softly, almost too calm. Maybe what really bothers you, she said, is that the industry doesn't revolve around you anymore." Travolta froze. The smile vanished. His eyes darkened, his posture straightened. And that's when everyone in that studio realized this wasn't going to de-escalate. It was about to explode. The crowd was still buzzing from Travolta's last line. You could feel the unease settle over the room. Half of it quiet shock, the other half a sort of morbid curiosity, waiting to see what would happen next. Whoopi leaned in, her tone calm but cautious, trying to steer the conversation back toward neutral ground. "Let's not lose sight of the movie," she said with that steady host smile, but everyone could tell control was slipping. Joy wasn't finished. Her grin was polite, but the air around her felt electric. "John," she said, "when people hear comments like yours, they think you're not happy with the changes happening in Hollywood." Travolta met her gaze squarely. "I never said that," he replied. "I said stories matter. People matter. That's always been the point. It might have ended there, but it didn't." Joy leaned back, folding her arms, that small knowing smile still on her face. "Sure," she said, "but some people might hear it as nostalgia for the good old days. You know, when stories mostly looked a certain way." The crowd stirred. Travolta took a long breath. "That's not what I meant," he said evenly. "I've supported all kinds of storytellers. I've worked with directors and casts from every background. You're twisting this into something it's not." Joy laughed again, light but sharp. "If that's true, then name them," she said. The studio went silent. Travolta's jaw tightened. He listed several projects, films where he'd worked alongside newcomers, supported diverse crews, pushed for voices outside the mainstream. But Joy waved a hand dismissively. "That was a long time ago," she said. "Hollywood's different now." That's when Travolta's posture changed. The easy charm vanished. He leaned forward, voice firm but not loud. "You're not asking me questions," he said. "You're accusing me of something that isn't there." Her smile dropped a fraction. "I'm just asking what people want to know," she replied. "No," Travolta said, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're creating an argument that doesn't exist." Whoopi spoke up again, her voice more forceful this time. "Hey, let's keep it cool, okay? We can have this talk without turning it into a fight." But neither was ready to step back. Joy crossed her arms again. "John, you've been around long enough to know words have power," she said. "Maybe it's time to take responsibility for how they land." Travolta straightened, his tone calm but cutting. "And maybe it's time for people to stop reading motives that aren't there." The studio froze. The applause light flickered, unsure whether to cue the audience or not. No one clapped. Whoopi sighed quietly, eyes flicking toward the producers off camera. Everyone in that room knew. They just crossed from interview to confrontation, and there was no going back. The atmosphere had changed from uneasy to explosive. You could almost feel the studio lights heating up as the two locked eyes, neither willing to blink first. Joy leaned forward, her tone clipped. "You've had every opportunity in this industry," she said. "Maybe it's hard to see what change looks like when it's not built around you." Travolta gave a slow shake of the head, his voice calm but sharp. "You think you know my story? You don't. You see headlines, not history." That line hit like a quiet thunderclap. The audience murmured, half sympathetic, half skeptical. Joy didn't hesitate. "Then enlighten us," she said. "Because right now, it sounds like you're saying things were better when fewer people had a voice." Travolta leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze unwavering. "I'm saying movies used to connect to the heart. Not politics, not agendas. People. That's not nostalgia. That's honesty." Joy smiled thinly. "And you don't think more voices make stories stronger?" He nodded once. "They do, when it's about story. Not when story becomes second to message." Whoopi interjected, louder this time. "Okay, let's take a breath," she said, her voice slicing through the noise. "We're losing focus here." But the tension was alive, pulsing. Joy's reply came before Whoopi could continue. "You call it message. I call it progress," she said. Travolta's tone hardened. "Progress isn't the same as replacing one formula with another." Sunny tried to jump in, her voice gentle. "Maybe you're both right in different ways." Neither listened. Joy said. It's easy for someone who's always had space to talk about balance, Travolta countered instantly. And it's easy to attack someone's character when you can't refute their point. The room went still again. For the first time, Joy's expression flickered, just slightly, before she straightened her posture, smiling as if unfazed. No one's attacking your character, she said. You're just not used to being questioned. Travolta's voice rose a notch, measured but heated. I've been questioned my whole career. But questioning isn't what you're doing. You're accusing. The audience didn't know how to react. Some clapped, some gasped, others just stared, stunned by how raw it had become. Whoopi looked directly at the camera, almost pleading. We're going to take a quick break, she said, but the control was gone. Joy ignored her cue. If you can't handle the conversation, she said, maybe you shouldn't start it. That's when Travolta stood, not abruptly, but with a slow, deliberate motion that made everyone hold their breath. I didn't start this, he said evenly, but I'm not letting you rewrite what I said, or who I am. Whoopi stood too, stepping slightly between them, her expression unreadable. Joy crossed her arms, voice firm. Then say it plainly. What did you mean? Travolta looked straight at her. That Hollywood's losing sight of story in the noise. That's it. You added the rest. The silence after that lasted a full 5 seconds, an eternity on live television. Then, with a faint, almost defiant smile, Joy said, Sounds like the old guard talking. Travolta's jaw clenched. The tension had broken through every barrier of civility, and before the audience could process what they'd just witnessed, everyone realized they were watching one of the most uncomfortable moments in live TV history unfold in real time. When Joy dropped that old guard line, it hung in the air like smoke. The audience shifted in their seats. You could feel everyone holding their breath. Travolta's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low, each word deliberate. You know, he said, I've heard that term tossed around a lot lately. Funny how it's only used to shut people up. Joy tilted her head, almost smirking. It's used when people resist change. Travolta nodded slowly. And sometimes it's used when people don't want to hear perspective. The crowd reacted with scattered applause, half nervous, half relieved to make a sound again. But Joy wasn't backing off. Perspective, she repeated, isn't a free pass to say whatever you want without consequences. Travolta leaned forward. Neither is twisting someone's words because it makes a better segment. That line landed hard. You could see the panel tense. Sonny's eyebrows lifted. Alyssa looked down at her notes. Whoopi rubbed her temples. Joy exhaled, visibly trying to hold her composure. John, she said slowly, you've been doing this long enough to know. Public figures don't get to pick how people interpret their comments. He gave a small, tired smile. Maybe not. But I still get to say when someone gets it wrong, the crowd murmured again. Whoopi raised her hand, trying to cut in. Okay, but Joy overrode her. Are you saying everyone misunderstood you? Or just the people who didn't like what you said? Travolta's eyes hardened. I'm saying intent matters, he said. And context matters. You can't build a fair conversation on half a sentence. Joy folded her arms. Maybe that half was enough. That did it. Travolta stood, not in anger, but in exhaustion. You invited me here to talk about my work, he said. I came in good faith. I didn't come to be a headline. Whoopi stood too, stepping in front of the table slightly. John, come on, let's cool it, all right? We're live. But he wasn't yelling. His tone had changed, firm, disappointed, calm in the way someone gets when they've already made up their mind. I've been in this business 50 years, he said. I've done this dance before, but I won't stand here while someone calls my respect for storytelling a problem. Joy's voice cracked just a little when she replied. Then maybe it's the way you say it that's the problem. He shook his head. Or maybe it's the way you hear it. That line hit like thunder. The audience split in half, some clapping, some booing, others too stunned to react. The producers were waving frantically off camera. Whoopi's voice finally cut through. We're taking a break, now. But before the cameras faded, one last exchange slipped through. Joy leaned forward. You can walk off if you want, John, but people will remember what you said today. Travolta turned, one hand already on his mic wire. Good, he said. Maybe they'll remember that I stood for myself. Fade to black. The cameras cut to commercial, but the tension didn't. The studio felt colder now, as if everyone had suddenly remembered they were part of a live disaster they couldn't rewind. Crew members whispered off to the side, producers gestured wildly, and the hosts sat frozen, each staring at anything but one another. Travolta stood near his chair, the mic still dangling from his jacket. His expression had hardened into something unreadable. Half anger, half disbelief. Joy sat still, pretending to scroll through her notes, her hands trembling just enough to give her away. Whoopi leaned toward them both, voice low and firm. "We can't do this again after the break," she said. "We're live. Keep it civil." Joy gave a short nod, but her jaw stayed tight. Travolta didn't answer. He just straightened his jacket, took a long breath, and looked toward the floor audience. They were whispering, watching him like a scene they couldn't look away from. Then came the producer's voice over the speaker. "We're back in 10, 9, 8. Everyone snapped upright, masks sliding back into place. The red light blinked on. Whoopi smiled at the camera, her voice the picture of calm professionalism. "Welcome back to The View, folks. We were just talking with John Travolta about his latest film." But the illusion didn't last. The moment Travolta opened his mouth, you could tell the air hadn't cleared. "I'll finish my thought," he said evenly, turning toward Joy without naming her. "Art doesn't have sides. It's supposed to reflect life, not divide it." Joy gave a small laugh, forced but sharp. "No one's dividing anything, John. We're just calling things what they are." The audience tensed again. Travolta smiled faintly, though his eyes didn't match. "That's the thing about labels," he said. "Once you start using them, that's all you see." A few people in the crowd clapped. Others murmured. Sunny tried to jump in, bless her heart, hoping to redirect. "Let's talk about your film for a second, because it really explores redemption, right? What drew you to that theme?" Travolta looked at her with clear gratitude. "Yeah," he said softly. "Redemption's something we all chase. Not to fix the past, but to understand it." The tension eased slightly until Joy spoke again. "Do you feel like you need redemption for that interview quote?" she asked, smiling sweetly but with daggers in her tone. The audience gasped. Travolta blinked, and for a moment the hurt flashed through. Then it was gone, replaced with composure so calm it was unnerving. "No," he said. "I don't feel like I need redemption for speaking honestly." Joy's reply came instantly. "Honesty without accountability isn't bravery." He met her stare. "An accusation without understanding isn't journalism." The studio was silent again. Whoopi stepped in, voice firm. "All right, we're going to wrap this segment. I think everyone's had their say, but Joy wasn't done. One last question," she said quickly. "Do you think maybe you're too used to being agreed with?" Travolta leaned forward, voice steady, almost gentle. "I think I've spent my life learning when to walk away," and with that he reached for his mic pack. Whoopi's eyes widened. "John," he looked at her calm now. "With all respect, Whoopi, I think we're past talking." The red light stayed on as the crew froze. The audience held its breath. Travolta removed his mic, set it on the table, and pushed back his chair. He didn't storm off. He just left. And in that moment, everyone knew. Daytime television had just witnessed something that would replay for years to come. You could have heard a pin drop. The camera followed him for a split second, John Travolta walking calmly but deliberately toward the stage exit. No shouting, no grand gesture, just quiet resolve that somehow felt louder than a scream. The audience didn't know what to do. Some started clapping out of reflex, others sat frozen, hands halfway together, unsure whether they were witnessing strength or disaster. Whoopi looked toward the control booth, then back to the panel. "All right," she said finally, trying to save the show from total collapse. We're going to take another quick break." But the director didn't cut fast enough. The red light was still on, catching everything. Joy staring straight ahead, her expression unreadable. Her lips pressed into a tight line, shoulders rigid. Sonny leaned over, whispering, "He's really gone." Joy didn't respond. Her eyes flicked toward the door Travolta had just walked through. "He'll be fine," she said quietly. "They always are." Whoopi shot her a look that could have melted steel. "That's not the point," she said under her breath. The cameras finally cut, but the damage was already done. The crew moved in different directions, one chasing Travolta backstage, others swarming Joy and Whoopi for instructions. The entire set buzzed with nervous energy like a storm had just passed, but no one knew if it was over. Backstage, Travolta handed his mic pack to a stagehand and paused at the hallway. Someone from production tried to stop him. "John, can we get a statement before you go?" He shook his head. "There's nothing to say," he replied. "You saw it." He turned to leave, then stopped, glancing back toward the stage. "You know," he said softly, almost to himself, "this was supposed to be about the film." And then he was gone. Back on stage, the tension hadn't lifted. The crew counted down to live again. Whoopi exhaled deeply, straightened her jacket, and forced a smile for the camera. "Welcome back to The View," she said, her voice steady but flat. "We, just had a spirited conversation with John Travolta. We wish him the best with his new film." Joy's expression didn't change. She gave a short nod, eyes forward, saying nothing. Sonny tried to fill the silence. "It's a great movie," she offered softly. "Really heartfelt," Sarah followed quickly. "Yeah, I think audiences are going to connect with it." Whoopi cut in again. "That's right. And, we'll be right back." The screen faded to commercial for real this time. In the few seconds before the sound cut, a hot mic caught Joy's voice. Quiet, defensive. "I asked fair questions," she said. He didn't like the answers. Whoopi's reply was faint but sharp. "Sometimes it's not about being right, Joy. It's about knowing when to stop." The clip went viral later that day. Millions watched it, not the movie trailer, not the film discussion, but the argument. Comment sections split in half, hashtags exploded, and everyone had an opinion. Some said Joy was fearless. Others said she'd crossed a line. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one had ever seen John Travolta that angry or that composed on live TV. In the days that followed, the clip refused to die. It wasn't just a viral moment anymore. It had become a conversation starter everywhere from Twitter threads to college media classes. The question wasn't who was right anymore. It was what the moment said about all of us. Entertainment outlets called it the turning point for talk TV. Producers started rethinking how far hosts could push a guest before crossing from accountability into ambush. Editorial meetings around the industry reportedly had one phrase on repeat. "Don't pull a View moment." Every show wanted to avoid becoming the next spectacle. Journalists debated the ethics of confrontation on air. Some said Joy's line of questioning represented a cultural shift. Audiences wanted directness, not diplomacy. Others argued it was proof that empathy was becoming extinct on television, replaced by sound bites engineered for outrage. Travolta, meanwhile, became an unlikely symbol for restraint. Clips of him calmly removing his mic and leaving circulated, under captions like "Class over Chaos." His quiet dignity was dissected and celebrated like a masterclass in self-control. Podcasts devoted entire episodes to the encounter, treating it like a case study in communication breakdowns. One viral clip showed a media analyst saying, "That moment wasn't about Travolta versus Joy. It was about the death of listening." It resonated, because deep down, everyone recognized something familiar in that exchange: the defensiveness, the misinterpretation, the sense that no one was actually hearing anyone else. It was Hollywood drama, sure, but also real life in miniature. Joy stayed on The View, of course. The controversy brought record-breaking ratings. But she became a more polarizing figure than ever. Her fans praised her fearlessness. Her critics called her a provocateur who cared more about moments than meaning. Travolta, on the other hand, came out of it looking steadier than ever. He didn't post a video. He didn't tweet a comeback. He just let silence do the talking. And in an age of constant noise, that silence hit harder than any statement could. By the end of the month, his film, ironically about second chances, opened to huge box office numbers. Reviewers couldn't resist the parallel. One headline read, "Travolta finds redemption off-screen, too." For all the chaos, one truth remained. Nobody expected a simple morning show appearance to spark a cultural storm about ego, empathy, and the art of disagreement. And maybe that's why people kept rewatching. Not to see who won, but to remind themselves how fast something ordinary can turn extraordinary when pride, principle, and perception collide live in front of millions. Weeks later, the noise began to fade, but the moment never really went away. Clips still surfaced every few days, stitched into reaction videos, essays, and endless debates. People weren't talking about the movie anymore. They were talking about that moment, when conversation turned into confrontation and respect gave way to pride. And somewhere in that chaos, something shifted. Talk shows became more cautious. Producers began briefing guests differently, preparing them not just for questions, but for the possibility of conflict. Hosts were told to push for answers, but not to push people over the edge. The unwritten rule had changed. Go deep, but don't draw blood. Meanwhile, Travolta moved on quietly. No press tour redemption arc, no dramatic comeback post, just work, gratitude, and a few well-placed smiles when reporters asked about the view. When one interviewer finally pressed him months later, he paused for a long time before answering. "You can't control what people hear," he said. "You can only control how you speak, and I'd rather speak honestly than say what's safe." It wasn't a defense. It was closure. Joy never apologized outright, but she did soften. In a later episode, she said something that sounded close enough. "Sometimes you get caught up in proving a point and forget there's a person on the other side of it." The audience clapped. It wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine. That's the thing about television. It captures everything. The words, the glances, the silence between them. And sometimes the silence speaks louder than any quote ever could, because in that studio, that morning, something real happened. Not scripted, not rehearsed, just two people standing their ground on live TV, each convinced they were right, both missing the chance to meet in the middle. And maybe that's why it stuck with everyone. It wasn't about Hollywood. It wasn't about diversity, fame, or even ego. It was about the simple, painful truth that conversation has become combat, and everyone's listening to reply instead of understand. Travolta walked away that day, but his words stayed behind. Art doesn't have sides, a simple sentence that outlived the argument, the headlines, and even the outrage, because it wasn't just about movies, it was about us, about remembering that stories, like people, mean more when we stop trying to win and start trying to hear. So, after all the clips, takes, and reactions, maybe the question isn't who was right, maybe it's what we learned from watching it. All fall apart in real time. Whose side are you on now? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and let me know if you think this could have gone differently. Because sometimes the real drama isn't in the movie, it's in the moments nobody planned to make,